People have this image of resiliency like a Nerf football. And if you take that Nerf football and you squeeze it, right, you compress it down and then you let it go, it goes back into its original shape. And we think that's what resiliency is, that I should have this experience happen and my bounce back should look like I did before. But if you think of those old school coat hangers, the metal ones, you could take that coat hanger and you could untwist it, right? You could straighten it out and you could use that to open your car door. And when you're done with it, you could take it and you could bend it back into a coat hanger shape. But you couldn't get it to look exactly like it did before. It's going to have kinks in it, going to have bends in it. That's resiliency.
Coming to you from the 80/20 Conflict Management Headquarters in Edmonton, Alberta, this is the Timeline of Self-Defense with your host, Randy King. What is up, internets, and welcome to the Timeline of Self-Defense podcast, the show where we break down real-world violence using my before, during, and after model. This whole thing is built on the same framework you'll find in my upcoming book, The Timeline of Self-Defense Before, During, and After Violence, coming out May 5th, 2026 with YMAA Publishing. And yeah, it's still a podcast. We just borrow the pacing of a late-night talk show because safety tips go down a little bit better when they don't feel like homework. Every week, I sit down with experts, survivors, and coaches to dig into what actually works in the self-defense world. If you want my full interview, all 10 of my questions, bonus conversations, or you're looking to bring me in for a keynote, public speaking event, or a hands-on workshop, just head to randykinglive.com. Everything is there, including my socials. Now, let's make you a little bit safer and start the show. What if everything you've been told about resilience is wrong? Today's guest is Dr. William Doc Kennedy, a forensic, clinical, and sports psychologist with over 30 years of experience helping people recover after violence. He's worked everywhere from maximum security prisons to community clinics and even evaluated violence prevention programs in over 20 U.S. states. Doc doesn't just understand trauma, he trains for it. He's a martial artist, a self-defense coach, and a behavioral threat assessment expert who bridges the gap between physical skills and psychological survival. This is the after phase of the timeline, and we are talking about what really happens after the encounter, why trauma lives in the body, what recovery actually looks like, and how to train now so you're not trying to rebuild from scratch later. But first, it's time for Red Flags and Reality. Welcome back to Red Flags and Reality, the part of the show where we take the headlines you might scroll past and turn them into lessons that can actually keep you safer. Tonight, we're in the after stage of the timeline with my guest, Dr. Bill Kennedy, digging into what recovery really looks like and why you can't just walk it off. Now let's get to the headlines. Missouri EMT files lawsuit claiming PTSD after being forced to work with the same dispatcher who taunted her during a 911 call, according to USA Today. A paramedic was dispatched to a distressing 911 call only to discover that the man was mocking her in real time. The psychological stress from that incident led to a PTSD diagnosis, and now she's suing her employer. The lesson here, trauma isn't always about physical danger. The body stores stress, and psychological betrayal can leave lasting damage. If your system doesn't feel safe after the event, recovery stalls. Next up, a UK veteran wins tribunal after being fired for panic attacks for military trauma. A former British soldier was dismissed from his civilian job because of panic attacks tied to past combat trauma. He won a wrongful termination case after showing that his employer failed to accommodate PTSD symptoms. The lesson here, trauma isn't linear. Just because it's in the past doesn't mean you're done with it. Systems and employers need to respect the long tail of recovery. Our third story, Seoul subway operator faces scrutiny after worker suicide linked to post-assault isolation. A transit worker who had been physically assaulted on the job later died by suicide. Investigation revealed his employer failed to provide support or mental health leave, isolating him until the aftermath became unbearable. The lesson here, the aftermath isn't just about what you do, it's about what others don't do. Social support isn't a bonus, it's a survival tool. And in the world of research, trauma is stored in the body. Study confirms somatic memory in PTSD. A landmark study confirms what many trauma experts have known for years. The nervous system physically stores trauma responses even when the conscious mind moves on. The lesson here is you can't shake off what your nervous system is still carrying. The body keeps the score, and recovery requires more than just good vibes and time. Bottom line, recovery isn't a straight line. It's not about getting over it, it's about learning to live with it, and support makes all the difference. Now, let's get to our guest. Studied both athletes and people recovering from violence. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you see about how quickly the body and mind bounce back?
People have in their mind what they call stage model. They think about people going through stages. The clearest one that people know is for stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And stage models mean some things. If I start at the beginning at the left, and then I move over and I move over and I move over, and I stay there for a while, I must be stuck. Or if I go left, 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 and then back to the right, then I must be going backwards. And when I get to the last one, I'm done. But it's really more like a wheel, right? It starts, and then you go through these steps, and you reach a point where you are as finished as you're going to be, given who you are, where you are, and what's going on in your life and in your body and physically. And then it goes on the shelf. And then a day, week, month, year passes. You come into a new experience. You're not the same person. If it's a trauma, your kid's in third grade now and crap happened to you when you're in third grade, whatever, and it comes back off that shelf. And then I go back and reprocess it. And people think they must be stuck because they're staying in the same stage. But really what's happening is, if you think about a wheel rolling around on the ground, it's not staying in the same place, but the same part touches the ground over and over and over again. That's really what happens with recovery. And when I think that when I reach this stage, I'm done, I set myself up for disappointment.
A lot of people say things like, just shake it off, right? After a tough encounter. From a scientific standpoint, what actually happens in the nervous system that makes that advice not necessarily proper?
Well, first of all, trauma is stored in the body, whether you're talking in the central nervous system, or which is the part that's the brain and the spinal cord, or you're talking out in the periphery. And those nerves do one of two things, right? I'm going to hold up a cup of coffee and I'm going to touch it, and I'm going to imagine that it was really hot, right? Ow, Bill, don't do that. And what's going to happen is, even if I run my hand under cold water, if my hand gets close to that heating source again, it'll start to hurt before I touch it. This is an adaptive strategy that was developed in us from our cave mom and cave dad, where I'm fighting this tiger and I get away from it. And my brain says, hey, Bill, can I talk to you for a second, man? How about next time you don't let it freaking bite you first? How about you get away from it first? So our brain, our nerves sensitize. They become hyper aware, hypersensitive to pain. So if I feel the pain early, I can react to it and not take damage. These are classic PTSD symptoms. This is hyperarousal. I'm constantly on edge, looking for a threat. This is getting mad really quickly, because that's adaptive, right? If I can react fast to that danger, then I survive it more likely than if it takes 20 minutes for my adrenaline to kick in, I die out. I don't pass down any genes. So one thing that happens in the body when they experience a traumatic experience is they become sensitized to it. The nerves actually store that. Now, let's say the tiger gets Bill. I'm not getting away from it. It's just got me. I'm not getting out of here. Well, in that situation, I don't want to be a Zen monk at that time, right? I'm fully present for the physical sensation of the tiger chewing my leg. And I'm in touch with the beautiful red blood as it contrasts against green grass. Bullcrap. I want to take my brain, I want to take my body, and I want to send them as far away from each other as I can. That's dissociation. That is zoning out, numbing out. That tends to happen more often when I've experienced chronic trauma that I can't escape from. And it's my body keeping me safe, so I'm not present for it, since it's inevitable and I can't get away. Those things you can't just shake out of your nervous system just because you're not in the situation anymore. You have to train them out of it. You have to work them out of it, but they don't just go away. Just because I'm not in the situation anymore, my body stores that knowledge. It stores that memory, even if it is not a conscious memory. My body stores, just like you know how to tie your shoes, but you couldn't tell me probably how to make your right hand move to your laces. You can't explain that because the knowledge there isn't language based, and it stays there until you need it. The same way with trauma. So there is no just shaking off the trauma, because that knowledge is stored in your cells.
You've written about how adrenaline and cortisol linger long after the fight is over. How should someone in the aftermath manage those chemical hangovers?
There's this thing we talk about in therapy, and it's also in Buddhism and Zen and things like that. And the analogy, the acronym is RAIN. And RAIN stands for recognize, which means I notice there's something worth paying attention to. It can be internal, It can be external, it can be pleasant, it could be unpleasant, but I need to recognize that there's something going on. And then I need to accept it. And everybody gives acceptance this big kind of epic meaning. But all that I mean by acceptance is this. If I walked out in my lobby, I'm at my office now, if I walked out and I saw it was raining, it's raining. I know some things about that. I know that I am more likely to get wet. I am statistically less likely to catch on fire. I know that if I walk out with my tablet, it's more like uncovered. It's more likely to get damaged. What I don't know is that it's going to be raining next weekend and it'll ruin our plans. So acceptance is just noticing what's actually there without adding stuff to it that's not actually there, or without ignoring important parts of it. So I accept that I am experiencing whatever it is that I'm experiencing. Then I want to investigate it. Have I felt this before? Where do I feel this? Is this in more in my arms, my legs? What am I experiencing in this moment? Where does it come from? And then the N is non-identification. And that, in a nutshell, is recognizing that that feeling, that thing isn't me. Everything in the universe that I know of is made of parts. Nothing is just one thing. That is a piece of me, but it's not me. If I define myself by it and it's positive, someone can take it away from me. And then I feel like I'm nothing. If it's negative, if it's damaging, then I think I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm deficient. So recognizing that that piece, no matter how important it is, isn't me. I'm more than just this one thing. So if I do those things, then that will allow me to deal much better with that traumatic experience.
In sports psychology, people talk about recovery protocols, ice baths, sleep, nutrition. What are the equivalents for an after violent encounter where the trauma isn't physical but also psychological?
One of the things you're really looking at there is resiliency. People have this image of resiliency like a Nerf football. And if you take that Nerf football and you squeeze it, right, you compress it down, and then you let it go, it goes back into its original shape. And we think that's what resiliency is, that I should have this experience happen and my bounce back should look like I did before. But if you think of those old school coat hangers, the metal ones, you could take that coat hanger and you could untwist it, right? You could straighten it out and you could use that to open your car door, or you could use it to tie a door off to keep it open, or a whole bunch of things you could use it for, right? And when you're done with it, you could take it and you could bend it back into a coat hanger shape, but you couldn't get it to look exactly like it did before. It's going to have kinks in it, have bends in it. That's resiliency. When I have this traumatic experience, I can put myself back together, but I won't look the exact same. So if I have that belief that I should look just like I did, that's going to cause some problems. So that's some on what resiliency is. Some ways to manifest resiliency is, if I think about resiliency not as something that I am, he is resilient, but something that I do. People who manifest, who show this thing we call resilience, do certain things. One thing is they take care of their physical health. So I take care of my physical health when I've had a traumatic experience. I get diet, exercise, and rest. I do those things. I, again, cut back on things like alcohol. I take care of my emotional health, meaning when I experience traumatic things, one thing people tend to do is they stop doing things that they enjoy or that they did enjoy. And the more things I cut back, the less resources I have. It's a little bit like you start out with, I don't know, 6 gallons of stress in a 10-gallon bucket, and you cut out doing these things, and all of a sudden you've still got 6 gallons of stress, but it's only a 6.5-gallon bucket. My resources, my capacity for managing stress decreases. So I start cutting these things out that I used to enjoy. I start telling myself stories like I don't enjoy them as much anymore, which is probably true, but the belief there that I have to enjoy it right now in order for it to be a benefit right now isn't true. I keep these habits and these patterns and things that nourish me and refresh me, and that actually helps my mood. I take care of my social health, meaning I stay connected to people that are helpful for me, and I have the right to reject toxic help, because sometimes people have the best intentions, but their actions are toxic, and it is okay to not accept that help, no matter where it comes from. Whether it comes from a good place or a not so good place. I don't have to stay in that social context. I take care of my cognitive health. The stories that I tell myself, I am broken, I am damaged, are things that I change. I add more rewords. I am reevaluating, reworking, re-experiencing, renewing. myself. I look at myself as made of many parts. And even if this terrible, horrible thing happened, it's not me. It is a piece of me, a very important piece of me, but it's not me. I can't be broken because I am more than just this experience. I take care of my spiritual health, which means I stay connected to something bigger than me. That could be my community. That can be a formal faith-based. That can be nature, whatever. But I stay connected to something bigger than me. As a matter of fact, anxiety and fear is proportional to how disconnected I feel. The smaller I feel, the bigger everything else is, the more overwhelmed I can be. If I see that I am not really small because I'm connected to all of these other things, I don't feel as overwhelmed. I don't feel as isolated, right? And behavioral health. When I've had bad things, I say, well, screw it. I mean, how much worse can it get? I had a friend that said there's no situation, Bill, that's so bad that you can't F it up worse. So keep that in mind. Behaviorally, I need to do things that are good for me and not do detrimental things.
How do we distinguish between normal post-event stress responses and when someone might be moving into PTSD territory?
So that's another really good question. About 20% of the experiences and people that experience a potentially traumatic experience develop some type of PTSD or other trauma response, which means 80% don't. Healthy recovery is the norm, not the exception. That is the first thing people have to recognize. Most people recover fine without psychotherapy, without a group, without whatever. Most people recover well. So that's the first thing I need to keep in mind. Second thing, what makes something traumatic is it overwhelms my resources. That if, again, I've got two hands and I'm holding one hand, say at chin height, and this is how many resources I have. The other hand, I have at head height. This is how much the situation calls for. When I have this kind of situation, we think this is potential for trauma when it's calling for more than I have. And trauma is a combination of the event itself, my experience of the event, and the effects of that event. So best way to look at that is a kindergarten classroom catches on fire. No one is hurt, but catching on fire. For the kindergartner in that classroom, that is a different type of event and trauma and experience than it is for the third grader who is in the same building but 3 wings over. And that's different from the firefighter who goes in there. All 3 of those are the exact same event, right? But their experience in the event is going to be radically different. And the way that event affects them is going to be even different. So when it's a traumatic experience, I know it because my resources for coping are depleted and overwhelmed. Right? I know that some classic experiences are things like re-experiencing it in thoughts, what they say intrusive, meaning it pops into my head when I don't want it to, feeling like it's happening again, dreaming about it. That's kind of one piece. If I catch myself really trying to avoid situations that are similar to that or thinking about it, that's another piece. And then if I have altered physical sensations, I'm on edge, I'm jumpy, I'm edgy. I'm more irritated, more angry. I have trouble falling asleep, things like that. If I experience those types of things, then we start thinking, okay, this could be a problem. If they last for more than, say, 3-4 weeks, everybody can have that happen for a little bit. But if it goes on for more than 3 or 4 weeks, start thinking this is a problem. If it starts changing how I see myself, I start feeling more depressed, for example. Again, a few days, even a couple weeks, it's not a big deal. If it goes on for 3 or 4 weeks, then I start thinking this is altering things. The physical health, the things that we talked about for increasing resilience, if I find myself going the opposite direction on those things, I'm withdrawing, I'm beating up on myself, I am doing things to cope with it that help temporarily, but cause more problems for me than they solve long term. If I'm zoning out, numbing out, things like that, then we start thinking, okay, maybe this is having a detrimental effect, a traumatic experience.
So there's a cultural myth that toughness is ignoring pain. How do you explain to students or clients that acknowledging the aftermath symptom That acknowledging the aftermath symptoms is actually a form of strength.
There is a metaphor in, um, I want to say it's Mongolian history, may not be, but I think it's Mongolian, that a brave warrior is a cow without skin, meaning it is willing to feel everything. I would argue that being willing to experience whatever you're experiencing, being able to notice it, and being willing to accept that it's there is a lot braver because it's a hell of a lot more difficult than drinking a pint of scotch. So I'd say that if you really think you're as bad as you are, as tough as you are, as impressive as you are, let yourself really feel what's there and still function.
Doc, what role does social support play in recovery? And what happens to people who try to handle the aftermath all by themselves?
I think one of the biggest lies that we get taught and we buy into is that someone does something by themselves, right? I'm a self-made person. Unless you birthed yourself, first of all, don't even come to me with that, right? Unless you gave birth to yourself, then by definition, you've already lost that argument. Everything that we do is connected to some knowledge that we gained from somebody else, some experience we had with somebody, or that we're currently having. So you can let go of that delusion to start with. That delusion that says you can do this by yourself, because literally you can never do anything truly by yourself. So then it becomes a question of how much social involvement do I need and what do I want that to look like? What takes me closer to where I want to be and what takes me away from where I want to be? And cultivating those social relationships that take you closer to where you want to be spiritually, emotionally, cognitive, relationship wise is what you're trying to do. As long as you hold on to this illusory belief that somehow someone did this by themselves, and so I should have to do it by myself, or I'm not as good as, or I can't trust people because no one will help me. But in reality, I've already trusted people. I've trusted knowledge. If you read a street sign, you allowed somebody to influence you. If you followed that street sign, then you believed something that someone told you. So keeping in mind that this is an illusion, that I can do this by myself, will liberate you to decide what help do I genuinely need.
From your research, what does the timeline of healing actually look like? Are there common patterns or is it wildly individual?
It's individual, and it's going to depend a little bit on the nexus of uh, what was the traumatic experience. So again, what we said before, the event, my experience of the event, and the effects of the event. So that's going to decide some of it. Where I am developmentally is going to have another piece to it. They had a really wild study. If you took two 12-year-olds, right? The first 12-year-old, their first year of life was just chaotic, crazy, traumatic, damaging. And then the next 11 years were really solid. The other kid, the first year was very solid. The next 11 years were chaotic and crazy. The one who had the one first solid year is on average doing better than the other one because so much of that stuff happens in my brain early on. All this trauma, all those stress hormones happen early childhood, in utero, and that sensitizes my system to be hyper reactive to things. So developmentally is going to matter too, right? But if you take all that stuff and you just set aside and say, okay, doc, average it out for me, then if you are still experiencing it 2 or 3 days afterwards, that makes sense. 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, that makes sense. A couple months after it, okay. 3 or 4 months after it, you should be leveling out probably. It should still be affecting you, but it should be affecting you differently. And if several months out to a couple years out, you're still feeling it the same way that you did, it's probably having an effect that we can do something about.
If someone is training for self-defense, what should they be practicing now, not after an incident, to build resiliency for the recovery phase?
So many things. One thing for recovery is something called heart rate variability, HRV. And that is, if you look at someone's pulse, right, and it's say 60 beats per minute, just working on it, that's an average. Those beats aren't exactly 1 second apart. One of them might be a little bit longer than a second. One might be a little bit shorter than a second. And what's happening is my body needs different levels of oxygen. So it says, oh, get you a little bit more. I'll get you a little bit less, a little bit more, a little bit less. That's heart rate variability, right? And what I want is my heart rate variability to be really high. I want my heart to be responsive to what my body needs. Think about a really zippy sports car. If it needs to get up and get into that gap, it punches it and it can get there. If it needs to brake, it can do that. I want my heart to be able to do that. There are a lot of exercises that I can do, a lot of things I can do to increase that adaptive function, heart rate variability. Everything from meditation does that to contrast showers. And for your audience, I tried one today. They suck. As a kid, as a teenager, when I was fighting, that kind of stuff, it was great, right? And that's take the water warm, really warm, and then slam it cold and tolerate that cold for about 30 seconds to a minute and either end there or turn it back up to warm again and then slam it cold. You want to end on a cold. And that sets up the sympathetic nervous system, the threat detection system, and the all's clear system. It gets it used to vacillating. So a lot of things like that, making sure that you're getting diet, exercise, and rest before you need it is another thing to do. All the things that are good for your body are good for your brain too, because your brain's a part of your body. So if you are doing those things, then you're setting yourself up to tolerate stress better. Make sure that you have good social connections, people that will check on you and that you will check on. Have a community. All those are things to get in place for your cargo net so that when you fall off of something, it catches you.
Well, you've worked with both competitive athletes and survivors of violence. Where did the recovery worlds overlap and where are they different?
I would say most of the overlap are in the physical recovery of their bodies, right? Adrenaline is adrenaline, whether it's because the starter pistol went off and you're trying to break a world record or because a gunshot fired and you were trying to get to safe. So that part of it is the same. I want to do the same things physically to allow myself to recover. The emotional piece is radically different, I think, especially alterations in terms of how I see myself. One of the things with traumatic experiences is I'm constantly looking at myself differently and what's wrong with me. That becomes my mantra. There are a lot of things that I know now at 56 that I didn't know at 26. And there's a tendency to have a hindsight bias and look back and say, because I know this at this point in my life, I should have been able to see it at that point. So pro tip, if you're with your kids at a restaurant that has little menus for kids, and on the back of it, it has like the little maze. If you start at the end of the maze and work backwards, it's a lot easier to solve because there's only one way that you can go out of it and fewer choices. It's easy to look backwards and see the track that you could have followed, but that's not apparent going forward. So giving yourself some grace to recognize that there's no reason why I would have been able to see this. Sure, technically I could have, but there's no reason why I would have been looking for this is one of the things that you have to do with survivors of traumatic experiences that you don't really have to do with athletes in the same way. Athletes, you're doing their trauma work when it's a potentially season or career-ending injury, when they have reached a point where they are no longer able to compete, either because they've graduated or they've aged out of a younger man's game or younger woman's game. So that's when you're going to see that trauma as a loss. That's an overlap with the trauma of some other loss that someone experiences, a death. So physical and ending pieces are where they overlap, but beating up on the way that I talk about myself and how it changes how I see myself is something that diverges.
If you could replace the phrase walk it off or shake it off with a new cultural mantra about recovery, what would it be?
Feel it and do it anyhow.
What is the one most critical, important thing they should remember after listening to this episode? Or what is something they can do right after this episode that will help them?
When I recover successfully from trauma, I may not look the same as I did before. That's not the same as being damaged or broken.
Let's wrap this all up with takeaways. Here are my takeaways from my interview with Dr. Bill Kennedy for the after phase. First, let's kill the Nerf ball myth of resilience. You know the one, the idea that if you're tough, you just bounce right back to normal. Doc says that's nonsense. Recovery looks more like a coat hanger. You can bend it back into shape, but it'll never be the same as it was. And that's not failure, it's growth. Second, trauma lives in your body, not just your memories. Whether it's hypervigilance, numbing out, or random triggers, it's not just in your head. Your nervous system literally rewrites itself to protect you, even after the threat is gone. So no, you can't just calm down. You have to train your body to trust again. Third, recovery isn't a staircase, it's a wheel. We keep revisiting the same emotions just from different angles. If it feels like you're going backwards, you're not. You're just hitting that same spot on the wheel in a new rotation. It's progress, even if it doesn't look or feel like it. And finally, Doc dropped one line that I want you to tattoo directly on your brain. Feel it and do it anyhow. That's your new cultural mantra. Not walk it off, not get over it, not shake it off. Feel it and move forward anyways. That's real strength. Big thanks to Doc Kennedy for bringing both the science and humanity to this conversation. Go and check out his work at kcnt.com. There's a ton there on threat assessment, self-defense, and recovery strategies that actually work. And if this episode hit home for you, maybe because you're still feeling the weight of something that happened months or even years ago, share this episode with someone else who needs to hear it. You're not alone. You're not broken. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. If you want more of these deep dives, head to randykinglive.com and check out all the ways you can train smarter, live safer. Thanks again, Doc, and we'll see you next time.